Hello students, today I will talk about properties of the action potential. So today's class is about properties of action potential. You can if I remind you the definition of the action potential, what I told that if a stimulus of threshold intensity is applied to the cell membrane, then there is a reversal of the inside electronegativity of the cell membrane for very short period, and this reversal, this inside electropositivity of the cell membrane in respect to outside of the cell membrane, that is propagatory in nature. That means that is propagated from one part to the other part of the cell membrane. And these changes of the membrane potential is known as the action potential. Now let us see what are the properties of the action potential. So first property of the action potential, as I told from the definition of the action potential, that it is propagatory in nature. It is propagatory in nature. It is propagated from the origin of the stimulus beyond the site of the stimulus. Now let us see how the action potential generated at the point of the stimulus is propagated from that part beyond that part. Now the action potential that I told is propagatory in nature. This is bidirectional. Propagation of the action potential is bidirectional. That means two-way. So let us see here in this diagram. This is the case in the resting condition, in which the inside of the cell membrane is electronegative, outside of the cell membrane is electropositive. This is outside and this is inside. Inside of the membrane is electronegative, that is the status of the membrane potential during resting condition. Now if a stimulus of threshold intensity is applied at this part, suppose this part is labeled as A. At that particular part A, labeled as A, the stimulus of threshold intensity is applied. Now what happened? As per the genesis of the mechanism of the action potential, you know that at this particular point, inside will be electropositive, outside will be electronegative. That means at this particular point, inside will be electropositive and the outside will be electronegative, because in this area stimulus is applied, and as the stimulus is applied, there is an opening of the voltage gated sodium channels through which sodium ion will pass in, sodium ion will enter in. As the sodium ion will enter inside electronegativity will be changed, will be reversed to the inside electropositivity in respect to outside of the membrane. So we can say that in response to stimulus of threshold intensity at the point A, the cell membrane is depolarized. So we can say this is the area which is known as the depolarized area. This is known as the depolarized area. Depolarized area. So this is the depolarized area in response to the stimulus. Now here you see, in the adjacent to this depolarized area, cell membrane inside is electronegative, here also electronegative, here also electronegative. So let us label this area as B and this area as C. So adjacent to area A, that is B and C point, inside of the membrane is electronegative, electronegative, outside is electropositive. So we can say this area is the resting area. So these are the area which is known as the resting area. So this is the area which is known as resting area. So this is also resting area. This is B and C, both are the resting area. Now what's happened? Here you compare the point A and the point B or C. So here inside is electropositive and the depolarized area inside is electropositive and the resting area outside is electropositive. So as here electropositive, there will be flow of positive ions from A to B at the inside of the membrane. Flow of positive ions will from depolarized area to the resting area in the inside of the membrane. And in the outside of the membrane, what's happened? Flow of positive ions from the resting area to the depolarized area. From the resting area to the depolarized area. So positive ions flow will be opposite. In the interior, from the depolarized area to the resting area, and in the outside, from the resting area to the depolarized area. So there is a flow of positive currents that will create a local circuit. So here a local circuit will be created, will be operated, and here also a local circuit of positive flow, ion flow will be operated. Now because of this flow of positive ions due to this local circuit, what's happened? Here inside electronegativity will be decreased. Here inside electronegativity will be decreased because positive ions from this area is coming to this area. Positive ions from this area will come to this area. So making this area will be less electronegative. But the change of the membrane potential in any point, this happens only if a stimulus is applied. But here no stimulus are getting applied at the point of B or point of C. No stimulus is applied. Stimulus is applied on the A point, but potential changes is taking place in the B point and also C point because of the flow of positive ions from the depolarized area to the resting area. As a result, what's happened? After some time, the inside of the membrane at the point B or at the point C, the inside electronegativity will be decreased up to a threshold intensity, up to a firing level or critical level. That means inside electronegativity at the point B and at the point C will be decreased to up to the firing level. As once the inside electronegativity will be reached at the firing level, so at that point, particular point B, at the particular point B, at the particular point C, what's happened? There is an automatic opening of the voltage gated sodium channel because voltage is getting changed at the point B, voltage is getting changed at the point C. So what's happened? At this particular point B or C, voltage gated sodium channels are getting opened, but without no requirement of the stimulus. Here stimulus was applied and thereby voltage gated sodium channels are opened, but at this point B or C, no stimulus were applied even if the voltage gated sodium channels are opened. As the voltage gated sodium channels are opened at the point B or C, what's happened? This area will be now depolarized, or this area inside will be electropositive, electropositive, here also inside electropositive. So here you can see this one. So this is the point A, this is the point B, and this is the point C. So here now what's happened? Inside will be electropositive. At the C point also, inside will be electropositive. Outside of the B, electronegative. Outside of the B will be electronegative. That means now what's happened? Now what's happened? These points, this at the point B and at the point C, there is a depolarization. That means depolarization wave is passed from A to B. This is the A. So depolarization wave is passed from A to C and A to B. So bidirectional propagation of the depolarization from A point to C and A point to B. Bidirectionally it is getting propagated. So now B area will be, this area will be depolarized. This area is getting depolarized. This is the depolarized area. And here what's happened? In the meantime, at this particular point, the repolarization will start. Sodium channels will be closed. Potassium channel will be open. As a result, potassium ion will go out. And as a result, at this part, in this one will be again electronegative and this will be again electropositive. So now this A point will become the resting area. So A will be now again resting area. So previously A was the depolarized area. Now A will be at the resting area. And depolarization wave is passed from A to C and A to B bidirectionally. Now same thing will be repeated here. Same thing will be repeated here. Suppose in the rest adjacent to C, in the resting condition, there will be resting conditions. Adjacent to B, again inside will be electropositive and inside will be electronegative, outside will be electropositive. That means this area is the resting area. This area again is the resting area. So suppose this point is the D and this point is the E. So now what's happened? At the C point and the B point, these areas are depolarized. Adjacent to this D point and the E point, the areas are in the resting condition. So now again, what's happened? Again the positive ions will flow from depolarized area to the resting area. In the inside, positive currents will flow from depolarized area to the resting area in the inside, and the outside the positive ions will flow from depolarized area, this is the resting area, to the depolarized area. Here also resting area to the depolarized area, and thereby again a local circuit will take place. Flow of positive ions will take place locally, and that will again bring this potential difference at the point E and the point D towards the firing level or critical level, and that's result ultimately opening of the voltage gated sodium channels at the point E and the voltage gated sodium channels at the point D. So making this area will be again depolarized. This area will be again depolarized. So what's happened? This is the point A, this is the point B, this is the point C, this is the point D, and this is the point E. So what's happened here now? As I told, positive ions are flowing from inside C to E, making this area will be depolarized. That means at the point E now, inside will be electropositive and outside will be electronegative. Again similarly, at the D point, inside will be electropositive, outside will be electronegative, because flow of positive ions are flowing from B to D and here C to E, making this area, D area, is depolarized, E area is depolarized, and these parts, all these parts will be resting. So these are all the, again, these are all the resting area. These are all again the resting area. So this is the depolarized area and these are the resting area. So depolarization wave starting from A is now starting from A. This is now getting propagated from point A to the E, point A to the D. So bidirectionally, the wave of depolarization, or in turn the action potential wave, is getting propagated from the site of the stimulus beyond the site of the stimulus bidirectionally, and this is how the action potential is getting propagated from site of stimulus to the beyond to the site of stimulus bidirectionally. And this happens, this is the bidirectional propagation of the impulse takes place in case of non-myelinated fibers. So bidirectional propagation, and secondly, this in non-myelinated nerve, fibers, what's happened? This type of propagation takes place. So this is the mechanism of propagation in case of non-myelinated nerve fiber. The nerve fiber in which no myelin sheath is there, no myelin sheath, no insulator is there. So at this point here, depolarization is taking place at each and every point. Depolarization is taking place at each and every point. So in this non-myelinated nerve, what's happened? Depolarization takes place in each and every point. And as in each, there is a requirement of depolarization to each and every point of the membrane. This process is the slower process. Slowly, impulse is getting traveled from the A to E or from the A to D. So this propagation takes time because at each and every point depolarization is required. So this takes longer duration or slow process, longer duration or slow process. And the action potential, opening of the voltage gated sodium channels and potassium channels is the energy required process. So there is a need of maximum energy here because at each and every point the action potential has to be passed. Opening of the voltage gated sodium channels, potassium channels has to be opened or closed. So more energy is required. So in this process, what's happening? This process requires more energy. So this is all about the propagation of the nerve impulse in case of through the non-myelinated nerve fiber. Now in case of myelinated nerve fiber, what's happened? In myelinated nerve fiber, what's happened? So this is regarding the myelinated nerve fiber. These diagrams represents the propagation of the impulse via or through myelinated nerve fibers. So myelinated nerve fiber means there is a myelin sheath. This is the myelin sheath. These are the myelin sheath. So this is the myelin sheath which is insoluble, through which the ions cannot pass through. This is the insulator. This acts as the lipid membrane which acts as a insulator through which the ions cannot pass through. So in this type of nerve fibers, the flow of the ions only take place through the part of the neuron where no myelin sheath is present, and that is present at the gap in between the myelinated nerve, and that gap is known as the nodes of Ranvier. So these are the nodes of Ranvier. So these are the nodes of Ranvier, in which myelin sheath is absent. So let us consider now, this is the point A. In the resting condition, this is inside electronegative, and outside electropositive. At the point B, again inside electronegative, outside electropositive. At the point C, inside electronegative, outside is electropositive. This is the resting condition. Now here, if the stimulus is applied at A, then what's happened? Sodium channels will open up here. So sodium will enter inside. As a result, at the point A, sodium ion will enter. That results the reversal of the inside electronegativity. So that means this will be now inside electropositive and outside will be electronegative, and that area is known as the depolarized node of Ranvier. So this is the area which is known as the depolarized node of Ranvier. And adjacent node of Ranvier is distantly located. It is far away from point A and B. Where? It is at the B. This is at the point B. That is the resting node of Ranvier. So these are all the resting node of Ranvier. So now what's happened? In the same way, the flow of positive ions will from depolarized node of Ranvier to the resting node of Ranvier in the inside. From the depolarized node of Ranvier, that is A, to the point V, that is the resting area in the inside. In the outside, in the opposite direction, from the B to A. Here from the C to A, and thereby again a local circuit is getting developed in between the adjacent node of Ranvier, which are distantly located. As a result, what's happened? These parts will be now in the same way. This part and this part B and C will be now depolarized. So here what's happened? Now the inside at the point B will be electropositive, outside will be electronegative. Inside will be electropositive, outside will be electronegative. That is the point B and the point C, and this area is now known as the depolarized node of Ranvier. So B and the C node of Ranvier, which was in the resting condition previously, now will get depolarized, and that is known as the depolarized node of Ranvier. And in the meantime, at the point A, sodium channels will close, potassium channels will open. So potassium ion will go outside, and that means ultimately this will be in the resting condition. This will be inside electronegativity, outside will be the electropositivity, and that is the area point A, which will be now resting node of Ranvier. So action potential created at the point A is passed from point A to B or C, which are distantly located, which are located far away. And thereby what's happened? We can say the action potential is jumped from one node of Ranvier, that is A, to the adjacent node of Ranvier. So the action potential is propagated or jump from one node of Ranvier to other node of Ranvier. So in the same way, this will be again, it will be passed to this point, this will be passed to this point. So in this way, the action potential will be jumped from one node of Ranvier to the other node of Ranvier, and that type of conduction is known as the jumping conduction or saltatory conduction. So in myelinated nerve fiber, the process is known as the jumping conduction. So the wave of depolarization wave jumps from one node of Ranvier, one node to another adjacent node, and this is why this is known as the jumping conduction or saltatory conduction of the nerve impulse. So in case of myelinated nerve fiber, the action potential, propagation of the action potential is known as saltatory conduction of the nerve impulse, or jumping conductions, because in this case action potential depolarization wave is jumped from one node of Ranvier to other node of Ranvier, and here in this case what's happened? There is no need to pass the depolarization from each and every point of the nerve fiber. So at this part, no action potential is created. A depolarization wave is not passed. Depolarization wave is passed from A to B or A to C. So this area is getting avoided. So as there is no need to pass the action potential to each and every point, this area, this type of propagation requires very short duration or rapid in nature, or this is rapid, very rapid. This type of action potential or saltatory conduction is very rapid in nature, and as in this case what's happened, no need to depolarize each and every point of the nerve fiber, no need to open voltage gated and sodium channels and potassium channels at each and every point of the nerve fiber. So requirement of the energy is less. So in this case, the less energy is required in this process. So in case of saltatory conduction, what's happened? Less energy. In case of myelinated nerve fiber, less energy. In case of non-myelinated nerve fibers, more energy. In case of non-myelinated nerve fibers, longer duration, it is slow process. And myelinated nerve fibers, it is the fast process or rapid process. In the non-myelinated nerve fibers, depolarization wave has to pass each and every point of the nerve fiber. But in case of myelinated nerve fiber, depolarization wave need not pass to the each and every point of the nerve fiber. They only pass from one node of Ranvier to the other node of Ranvier, to the adjacent node of Ranvier, which are distantly located. So this is the mechanism by which action potential is getting propagated from one part of the neuron or from one part of the cell membrane to the other part of the cell membrane. So this is about the first property of the action potential. So now is about the second property of the action potential, that is known as the all or none law. So second property of the action potential, that is it obeys all or none law. So what is this all or none law? All or none law means if any stimulus is applied, then that stimulus has got the capacity to generate the action potential. If that stimulus has got the capacity to generate the action potential, then they will generate it maximally. That means any stimulus has got a capacity to generate the action potential, then that should be maximal. Action potential generated will be maximally. If we increase the strength of the stimulus, the action potential will not be further more in magnitude, more in height. And you know that action potential is generated only because of the threshold stimulus, as I told in the earlier class, earlier videos. So let us explain these things. Suppose a stimulus, that is sub-threshold stimulus, is applied. Sub-threshold stimulus is applied at the cell membrane. Then no action potential is generated. No action potential is generated. That means membrane potential, no change of the membrane potential. Now suppose I have applied the threshold stimulus, threshold intensity, threshold stimulus. Suppose the threshold stimulus is 5 millivolt. Suppose 5 millivolt. Here I have applied less than 5 millivolt. Less than 5 millivolt. That is the sub-threshold stimulus, which did not change any potential difference that ultimately turned into the action potential. So no action potential is developed here. Now in case of threshold stimulus of 5 millivolt, if I apply, then the action potential is developed, and that is magnitude of is suppose plus 35 millivolt. This is the potential difference, plus 35 millivolt. Now suppose I apply the strength of the stimulus greater than the 5 millivolt, which is supra-threshold. Supra-threshold stimulus is applied. Supra-threshold stimulus is applied. Suppose more than 5 millivolt. For example, 10 millivolt. Then what happens? The action potential will be generated, but that action potential will be similar to that of the plus 35 millivolt. This will be same. The height of the action potential will be same. It will not be increased even if the intensity of the stimulus is getting increased. That means here what's happened? The action potential, if generated, if the action potential is not generated, it is well and good. If it is generated, then it will be maximum. That means if we proceed further, if we increase further intensity of the current, intensity of the stimulus, the magnitude of the action potential will not be increased. So if the action potential is created, then it will be always maximally. Otherwise, no. If action potential will be created, then it will be always maximum. So in response to stimulus, what's happened? Either the action potential will be generated or action potential will be not generated. If generated, that will be always maximum. So that is known as the all or none law. So all or none law states that if action potential is generated, it will be maximal, or not at all will be generated. So that means if the stimulus intensity is below threshold level, it will not be generated. If it is threshold level, it will be generated, and that will be maximum. Why maximum? Because if we increase the strength of the stimulus, the magnitude of the action potential will not be further increased. So this is the phenomena, property that is known as the all or none law. So now is about the third property which is known as the strength duration relationship curve. Strength duration relationship curve. So third property, as I told, is that it obeys strength duration relationship. Strength duration relationship. So what is strength duration relationship? As I told, that generation of the action potential is dependent on the intensity of the stimulus. If the intensity of the stimulus is low, that is sub-threshold, action potential will not be generated. And if the intensity of the stimulus is at the threshold level, then only action potential will be generated. And that stimulus which has got the capacity to generate the action potential is known as the threshold stimulus. Now this threshold stimulus, for example, the threshold stimulus is 5 millivolt. So this 5 millivolts intensity of the stimulus has to be applied to the membrane up to a certain period. Otherwise, the action potential will not be generated. So, if that means that there is a relationship between the strength of the stimulus and duration up to which that has to be applied on the cell membrane. But what's happened? If we increase the strength of that stimulus, if we increase the strength of the threshold stimulus, then the duration requirement will be reduced. That means there is an inverse relationship between the strength and the duration. There is an inverse relationship. Inverse relationship is present in between the strength and the duration. Let us explain with the help of this graph. Suppose this is the voltage 2 millivolt. This is the voltage 4 millivolt. This is the 6 millivolt and this is the 8 millivolt strength. Now at that particular 2 millivolt of the, if we apply the 2 millivolt of the current, 2 millivolt of the strength of the stimulus, then suppose the duration required to induce the action potential, this is suppose 4 milliseconds. This is 4 milliseconds. This is 2 milliseconds, suppose. So at this part, so this is if the intensity of the threshold intensity is 2 millivolt, then duration requirement is 4 milliseconds. Now if we increase the strength of the stimulus to 3, this is suppose 3, this is 5, this is 7. So if it is 3, obviously duration requirement will be less. So duration requirement will be less. suppose this point. If it is 4, duration requirement will be further reduced. It will be further reduced. If the strength of the stimulus is 5, the duration requirement will be further reduced. If it is 6, it will be, suppose, this much. So the curve will be, if I draw the curve will be like this. Curve will be like this. So this curve is known as the strength duration relationship curve. Now here what's happened? This is the voltage. This is the voltage, 2 millivolt voltage. This is the voltage, minimum voltage, which is required to induce the action potential. So this voltage, minimum voltage that is required to induce the action potential, this one is known as, this strength of the stimulus is known as the Rho base voltage. So the minimum strength of the stimulus that is able to induce the action potential, that is for a that is known as the Rho base voltage. This current is known as the Rho base current. Now if we apply the Rho base current to a cell membrane, then a particular duration is required. And what is that duration? That is the 4 millisecond. This is the 4 millisecond. So this duration is known as the utilization time. So this duration that is required to induce the action potential by applying the Rho base voltage is known as the utilization time. Now if we apply the voltage that is twice of the Rho base, suppose the Rho base voltage is 2, so twice Rho base means 4 millivolt. So if we apply the 4 millivolt of the current, then the duration requirement is this 2. So this duration is known as the chronaxy. That means chronaxy is the duration in which the action potential can be generated by applying twice of the Rho base voltage. So if we apply the Rho base minimum strength of the current to induce the action potential, that is the Rho base voltage, and whatever duration is required to induce the action potential with Rho base voltage, that is known as the utilization time. And if we increase the Rho base voltage to 2 times of the Rho base value, then whatever time will be required, obviously less time will be required, and that less time is known as the chronaxy. So chronaxy is the time period, is the duration which is able to generate the action potential by applying twice of the Rho base voltage. So these 3 terms are important in the strength duration relationship curve. So here you see there is an inverse relationship of between the strength and the duration, and here there are the minimum strength that is required is known as the Rho base voltage. The minimum duration or time with Rho base voltage to induce the action potential, this is known as the utilization time. And the duration with twice of the Rho base voltage to induce the action potential, that is known as the chronaxy. So these are three terms which are important with the strength duration relationship curve. And now last one is the refractory period. So action potential has got always certain refractory period. So what is this? That is the fourth property of the action potential, that is the refractory period. So it has refractory period. So what is the refractory period? Refractory period means, here in this graph you see, as I applied a stimulus, an action potential is generated. Now so this is suppose S1. If I apply the second stimulus very quickly, suppose at this point I applied another stimulus of threshold intensity, then there will be no another action potential will be generated. That means once an action potential will be generated in response to stimulus, no further action potential can be generated on that same cell membrane, at least up to a brief period. After certain period, after certain gap, we can generate the action potential again, but there is a minimum period is required in which the cell membrane will become unresponsive to the second stimulus. A minimum duration is there in the cell membrane in which that will become unresponsive to the second stimulus. If we apply the second stimulus in that particular period, within this particular period, it will remain unresponsive. It will not give any response. And that short period in which cell membrane will become unresponsive to the second stimulus is known as the refractory period. So it is the period, it is the duration in which the neuron or cell membrane will be unresponsive to the second stimulus. Unresponsive to the second stimulus. That means at this S2, no action potential will be generated. And this period has got two parts or two components. One is known as the first one is known as the absolute refractory period, or ARP. So what is this absolute refractory period? This period, up to this period, what's happened? Even if we increase the strength of the second stimulus, if we apply the second stimulus with greater strength, for example, this stimulus is 5 millivolt. This is the threshold stimulus of 5 millivolt. That is able to induce the action potential. So if we apply that second stimulus S2, for example, 10 millivolt with maximum strength of 10 millivolt, even then no action potential will be generated. So that means this is the period in which even if the strength of the stimulus is increased, it will remain unresponsive. So in this case, what's happened? It remains unresponsive. Even the strength of second stimulus is very high. Even though the strength of second stimulus is very high, is increased, it will remain unresponsive. So that period is known as the absolute refractory period. And this period is from this level, from the firing level. So this is the firing level or critical level, firing level or critical level. So this level up to the this is the period, 1/3 of the rapid reproduction. This period is known as the absolute refractory period or ARP. So absolute refractory period, this absolute refractory period, this is equal to the from firing level of depolarization to the 1/3 of rapid repolarization. So this is the phase in which even if the second stimulus strength is increased, the cell membrane will become unresponsive. That is known as the absolute refractory period. Now in the second half of the refractory period, what's happening? At the second half, that means at the end of the absolute refractory period, up to the beginning of the this is the part, up to the beginning of this, after depolarization, this is the part which is known as the relative refractory period. So here what's happened? So second one is known as the relative refractory period. Relative refractory period or RRP. So in this phase what's happened? Here what's happened? If we increase the strength of the second stimulus, then it will evoke or generate the action potential. So at the late part of the refractory period, there is if the second stimulus strength is increased, it will give the response. So in this case, what's happened? During this period, cell will induce action potential to the higher strength of the stimulus, higher strength of stimulus. Cell will give the response to the higher strength of the stimulus. So that is the period which is known as the relative refractory period. And this period is how much? This period is how much? From end of absolute refractory period to beginning of after depolarization, from up to this phase, there is a period in which if we apply the second stimulus with suppose here 10 millivolt, then we can be able to get another action potential. So this is the period that is known as the relative refractory period. So the refractory period is comprised of, so we can say refractory period, that is the RP is equal to absolute refractory period plus relative refractory period. So refractory period is combination of absolute refractory period and the relative refractory period. In the absolute refractory period, even if the strength of the second stimulus is increased, cell membrane will be responsive. But if in the second phase of the refractory period, if we apply the second stimulus with higher strength, then the cell will become responsive. Cell will give the response because action potential will be generated. So this is all about the properties of the action potential. If you like this video, please share this, press the like button and subscribe this channel. Thank you.